Hi there, everyone. Welcome to Making Sense with Move to Amend, Move to Amend Coalition. And joining us today is a very special guest and a very personal friend of mine from Sacramento's and from the California area. Asantewaa Boykin from Anti-Police Terror Project, as well as local community-based mental health provider, mental health services crisis response called Mental Health First. Asantewaa, you want to give a, hey there. You're still on mute. I can hear you, but yeah, you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you fine.
Awesome. My name is Asantewaa, as Keyan said. I'm one of the co-founders of the Anti-Police Terror Project. We started a Sacramento chapter. I'm horrible with dates, but it was some time ago. And one of our projects here in Sacramento is called Mental Health First. We are a non-police mental health crisis response team. Which started in January, and we have since replicated in Oakland, and that started in 8/28 of 2020. Been doing this work for a very long time, most of my adulthood, actually, in its entirety. Thank you for having me in this space. I'm really looking forward to having just like an open discussion about movement work, where we see ourselves going, or if folks have questions about Mental Health First or APTP, definitely willing to answer those and to see where the convo goes.
That's awesome, and really so honored and excited to have you on the show today. Just to give a little overview for folks at home who are tuning in for the first time, Move to Amend is a nonpartisan grassroots national coalition committed to, or a coalition of hundreds of thousands of people and hundreds of organizations committed to social, political, and economic justice. Ending corporate rule and building a vibrant democracy that is genuinely accountable to all people and the planet, not just corporate interests. And together we are calling for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would unequivocally state that inalienable rights belong to human beings only, and that money is not a form of protected speech under the First Amendment, so that we can actually regulate it within our political processes. And one of our core strategy when it comes to building this movement powerful enough to change the foundational law of the land here in the United States we centralize the dismantling of oppression systems that exist literally from the founding of the United States. We are committed to building movements, or like to movement building and coalition building, particularly within those communities that are that have been most vulnerable and impacted by the powers of corporate rule that exist here today, particularly communities of color, where we live on the front lines of struggle against corporate rule, where majority of polluting toxic waste facilities tend to be built, where we are oftentimes left disadvantaged and and left in lower income areas where we are paid substantially less than the majority of the population, and so many other instances, including police terror, which law enforcement here in the United States tends to be the first line of defense for our corporate oligarchs and their wealthy properties. So with that, I wanted to open it up with a bit of some of the news that have come up this week. This week has been, as many of you know, we honored Indigenous Peoples Day, which recognizes Native people as the first inhabitants of the Americas, of course, including the lands that we currently live on here in the United States. And to date, only 14 states, Alabama, Alaska, Hawaii, Idaho, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wisconsin, and the District of Columbia and other places celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day in place of Columbus Day, the violent genocidal maniac from Europe who came over and basically claimed to discover the North American continent people already lived on. So A couple of pieces of news that have come up since then was the recent grant that the Environmental Protection Agency gave to Oklahoma, which basically reverses a landmark Supreme Court ruling that was given back over the summer and reverses tribal sovereignty that was recognized by the Supreme Court, and giving Oklahoma basic regulatory control over environmental issues on nearly all tribal lands there. And this particularly hits home, here within California as well. We have a large indigenous population here, and those of us that are involved in anti-police terror project, myself included, have a strong relationship with members of the indigenous community here in Sacramento. And really, I mean, it's really critical, like even within our struggle against police terror, as well as corporate rule, that we recognize that we walk in the footsteps and on stolen land from our indigenous brethren that live on this continent. Asantewaa, did you want to I wanted to turn it over to Asantewaa to kind of speak to a little bit about some of the indigenous issues that we deal with here in Sacramento and California as a whole, perhaps. And you're on mute.
Unmute.
I'm really glad you brought this up around Indigenous Peoples Day being this month. And, just historically, Indigenous folks have always shown up for Black folks, especially when we're talking about police terror, right? They've marched with us, beside us, sometimes for us, right? And I think that as a movement, we should be taking the time to center our Native siblings, right, as we move forward, making sure that we are in contact with Native folks who are from wherever, whatever lands we are currently occupying at the time, right? In Sacramento, we have Miwok and Nisenan, right? So simple things like reaching out to have land acknowledgements done. And even if there is no one who is particularly indigenous or indigenous from that area, just taking a second to acknowledge that we are currently living on stolen land goes so far, right? And then also just creating relationships with Native folks, because again, right, they were the first victims of colonialism, right, in this country. The genocide, the murder and the rape that continues, right? And when we talk about the most impacted, if you're living on American or Canadian soil, we are legitimately talking about our Indigenous brothers and sisters who are living, a lot of folks below a poverty line that we couldn't even imagine, right? In real time, right? So I'm really glad you're bringing that up. I'm hoping to continue to see this beautiful shift that's been happening in Sacramento specifically, where folks are unapologetically acknowledging and recognizing the stolen land that we are sitting on. And I would encourage anyone in any state, in any place, to it doesn't take long, right, to do that research. It doesn't take long to reach out. And then also, as folks are moving, just continuing to check our respective privileges, right? Because we all have some. I have, I make a livable wage and have a certain amount of educational privilege. So just checking those privileges as we're moving about in spaces, and keeping Indigenous issues in the forefront, and not just acknowledge and celebrate in replacement, right? To acknowledge the sacrifices that those folks have made and the conditions that they continue to live under today. think you're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Maybe my. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I think my audio or my microphone went out, but yeah, what I was just saying, indigenous people, just like Black people, Latinx people, women, and poor people, were not who the founders had in mind when they first wrote "We the People" in the Constitution. Right, our Declaration of Independence, that we were taught to believe is a fundamentally good instrument, refers to indigenous people as savages in themselves. Racism is baked right into our foundation, and like that's what, and it's why we have always believed that if we are ever to have a genuine democracy here in this country, that we have to be honest and critical about our founding documents that form the foundations of our laws and our institutions. We must be able to appraise them objectively, cutting through a lifetime of indoctrination that tells us that we aren't allowed to question these God-given ancient papers, and we must be able to ask ourselves, can we really expect to have genuine justice, reconciliation, and democracy if these are documents that continue to guide our nation's justice system and general ethos as a whole?
I say all the time, like the laws that we live under were created by white male landowners for white male landowners, right? Mm-hmm. And anything that deviates outside of that, they had to make amendments to set, right? To consider us, right? Women's suffrage, Black folks' right to vote, like all these things had to be amended because those documents and these laws were not written for us. And we have to keep that in mind as we're bumping up against the system of white supremacy, white patriarchal supremacy. That's like, I almost wonder if, not wonder, right? Because Mental Health First is doing some of that work, but some of us have to bump up against the system, right? And like dismantle it. And the others of us that are quite like cut out for that, like, like those are the folks that should be building alternative systems, right? So that while we're dismantling one that is based on white supremacy, we are also simultaneously building ones that are not, right? That don't have that tradition of being for white male landowners only.
Exactly. I mean, like I view, from my position here at Move to Amend, the mission of Anti-Police Terror Project, as well as Mental Health First, and its creating these alternative systems to police and for-profit privatized healthcare and such and so on, as being like instrumental and like directly aligned with our movement work here, at Move to Amend, where we also want to challenge people to engage in visionary thought exercises like we are doing right now in Sacramento and so many other places. And coming up next week, we'll be having an open national conversation, a People's Movement Assembly, on what it would look like to have a people's constitution that puts people and the planet first, not just property and profit interests. So I'm curious, I'm hoping you could talk a little bit about Anti-Police Terror Project's vision for alternative systems, as well as talk a little bit about Mental Health First and what you all are doing right now here in Sacramento.
So about that visioning piece, like I'm kind of like half hippie. Oh wait, am I muted? No, I'm not.
No, you're fine.
Kind of like half hippie, right? So I try to like encourage folks anytime I'm in a space to really spend some time, right, visualizing what a different world could look like or would look like. Because if we're not taking the time to think about what it is we want to see and only focusing on what it is we're trying to dismantle, then we're really doing ourselves a disservice, right? Because we could dismantle this whole shit stuff thing, right? And have no idea what it is we're going to do next, right? So if you are in a position where you have the time, the energy, the resources to spend a few minutes at a time just thinking about what it is you want to see exist in your community that is for your folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, said all that to say that mental health first existed organically already, right? Like in our community, there were just things that we did for each other because we had this shared belief in when people need care, they should get care, not handcuffs, not a bunch of pigs jumping on top of them, not being dehumanized in hospitals, right? Like folks need care, right?
Mm-hmm.
And care can look like a large spectrum of interventions, right? That could mean listening, that could mean safety planning, right? That could mean sometimes literally sitting on someone, right? Like, so this dynamic already existed in our community, and I think that sometimes where we fail at, like we already have all the things that we need, we don't scale them up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We don't scale up our mutual aid resource banks. We're not scaling up like mental health crisis response, right? Mental health first has done it, but like what other things in your community exist organically, right? And how can we make those things available to a larger community of folks? Not to say that like if you have this, this system of caring or this system of like even pooling and sharing resources, that you should just make it available to the whole city, right? What I'm saying is, how do you make it available to your whole block?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And how do you teach the block over to make that same resource available to their block, right? Like even like little cooperative economics things, right? While we still live under a capitalist system, how are we buying toilet paper? We know we can buy that shit in bulk from Costco. We know everybody's gonna need that shit. We know that everyone maybe can't afford it. So how are we pulling our resources to maybe make sure that the elderly woman on the corner doesn't have to pay as much as the doctor who lives 4 houses down for toilet paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like taking these systems that already exist and expanding them, right? Which makes us inherently less dependent on the white supremacist patriarchal power structure. So I would just encourage anyone to dream. That's the first step we did when we went to sit down to officialize mental health first. We called it a dreaming session. We legit sat around a room drinking coffee, eating pizza. And what we asked ourselves was, if money was not an object, what would we build? So we had this long list of things. We had on the list, there was like enough housing for absolutely everyone. Enough, right? Like all these like wild things, right? And then we had to understand that like this is what we're building towards. This is what we want to see. And what can we do right now? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So just going through that list and chopping away the things. Okay, so we can deal without that. We can deal without that. And then just like going through.
Uh-oh. I think we lost you, Asantewaa. While we're waiting for Asantewaa to get back on the live stream, just want to give a couple shout outs to folks who are joining us. Thank you, hello, and thank you for joining us, Judith from Santa Clara County, Move to Amend, as well as Terry from Sun City, Arizona. Glad you're still checking in with us, and definitely appreciate all the work you did in Sun City and continue to do, I'm sure. Also give a shout out to JD from Sioux, Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne territory out in Colorado. Really appreciate you all joining us today. And sorry about the technical difficulties. Asantewaa was actually on the road coming back from family areas, and just going to give her a couple minutes, but while we're doing that, continuing the part where she left off, of like how critical it is, beyond just the change in policy, but also to like actually envision a world that actually puts life and planet above.
It's in my phone over here, so I lost that.
No, you're all good. Like this sort of thing happen, and like this is a live free form conversation. Really. Folks at home, I want to encourage you all, if you have any questions for Asantewaa or me, by all means. And we also have another co-founder too with Anti-Police Terror Project, Adam Willits, who's joining us as well with Asantewaa. But yeah, feel free, those of you at home, if you have any questions about Anti-Police Terror Project, Mental Health First, or Move to Amend, by all means, answer them in the chat, and we will gladly discuss them. One of the things that came to mind when you, as you were talking, with really the need for these alternative systems, and like envisioning systems that prioritize human life and well-being above property and profit, is just like the current crises that we're seeing converge right now under COVID, right? It's been documented considerably over the last few months of how this impact of the pandemic is really taking a toll on people's mental health, in particular, most those vulnerable, most impacted communities, Black, Latinx, Indigenous communities that have have always been left out of the original conversation of what kind of democracy we want. And it's really like the current crisis really highlights, as one suicide researcher and professor of sociology at Indiana University, and Anna Mueller, pointed out, it's showing that this breakdown in our society, the breakdown of the safety net, the breakdown of economic security, is taking a massive toll. And these breakdowns really show how crucial economic stability and economic security are to an individual's well-being, because people who are more vulnerable in terms of socioeconomic status, people who are being put in harm's way, those are the people who are suffering the most. So, now more than ever is really the critical moment where we find ourselves. Like, this is the perfect time to really think about alternative systems, and it's already happening in several communities, particularly here in Sacramento. I'm wondering, grant from the state's mental health services administration, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, you're also looking to, like, you're already been operating for more than a year, working 12 hours a day, 3 days a week, responding, like, you have a separate number responding to mental health crisis calls that are completely separate from law enforcement institution as a whole. Would you like to talk a little bit about how that's going, and like what you all are seeing here during the crisis here under COVID?
Yeah, so it's been, so the timeline for us has been really interesting, and in the sense that we were not, we had
kind of hard hearing.
been in operation for very, can you hear me?
A little bit hard to get.
Yeah, so better? Oh, how's that?
Much better, much better.
Okay, all right. So we hadn't been in operation for very long before COVID hit, and then coupled with the mass rebellions around George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and even like Ahmaud Arbery, right? Like that boiling pot that eventually popped. So we've had an interesting shift in like what are called, and what the city and county are saying to us, right? I think our launch night, we had invited all of those folks, right? Just as almost as a courtesy to be like, yep, we're operating in your city, and we were ignored, right? But then when the community began to lift us up, while in the midst of like these public health crises like colliding. You know, public safety is a public health crisis, right? And then the public health crisis of coronavirus. So conversations are shifting, and I still am of the belief that these conversations are largely lip service. But I think what it does speak to is that there is a universal acknowledgement, specifically in mental health, how harmful the police are to citizens, or to residents. Let me not use that word. To residents. And how not only the people understand, but the establishment understands, one, they can't afford to keep paying these goddamn lawsuits, and two, that the pigs are not effective at doing that particular work, right? So I would say whatever city you live in, whatever state that is, figure out where the police can be organized out of our systems, right? Largely, no matter where you are, that could essentially be mental health, right? Are the police in your schools? How can we organize the police out of our schools? There have been several school districts that have successfully eliminated their contracts with PD, including college campuses and junior college campuses. Like, how can we advocate to have these folks removed from our campuses, right? So I think if we I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I am talking. So if there is a place where we're going to have to organize them out of our spaces, is what I'm saying, right? And maybe that organizing is incremental, right? Because as we start to organize them out of our spaces and replace those systems with systems that are built by impacted folks, then we're going to start to answer a lot of those questions, like, well, what do we do when they're absolutely gone? Because then we'll have these other systems that we've built to replace it, right? Because right now we don't know, right? Like, if the police were gone tomorrow, then what do we do, right? Because we can't say that harm will never be done, right? But as we create these systems, caring and affirmation, right, it will start to look a lot different. And I would just encourage folks to dream and visualize on that, figure out, and maybe just not even the police, right? But what other entity that is based on white supremacy, that does not do our community a service, can we organize out of? There's CPS, there's the police, there's probation and parole, there's some aspects of our healthcare system, right? There's pigs in some of these hospitals, right? Like, there are some ideals that exist in our current healthcare system that are absolutely and undeniably based on white supremacist theory. They legit teach it in school.
Education,
right? The education system, like, how do we organize those things that are harmful to us out of our spaces, right? And create ones that affirm us.
Speaking of organizing, within the grassroots, within our grassroots spaces, question from one of our viewers, Rob, is asking how much cross-pollination is going on regarding the collection of other great grassroots actions and such. Did you? I have what I wanted to give it to you what you're feeling from the cross-pollination.
Cross-pollination, organizing 101, you got to work with whoever you have inline principles with, because none of us can do it alone, right? But there's been a lot of like community support from different orgs, Incarcerated SAC, Black Justice, APTP Oakland. I hope I'm answering the question. SAC Soup, SAC Homeless Union, SAC, so there's just been a lot of our volunteers are also members of those respective orgs. Community associations have lifted us up and offered assistance in spaces. There's been local clinics, right? And a lot of organizing is just like building relationships with folks so that we can rally together when we need to.
Right. Yeah, I'm feeling the same thing, honestly. Like, this whole pandemic has brought, as well as, just the
Keyan, I think your mic
commercial.
is not doing the best because you're breaking up a lot.
I'm sorry, yeah, you're kind of breaking up a little bit too. I think it's just from you getting home or whatnot. But what I was going to say was, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of cross-pollination going on. Like since COVID really came up. Yeah, the bad audio is on your end, but yeah, you're fine now. You just muted. But yeah, in terms of cross pollination, like I've seen more local grassroots groups as well as national grassroots groups or state grassroots groups as well that have been engaging in conversations that I hadn't been seeing before COVID hit. And even under Trump, over the last 4 years, we've seen more movement issues and groups that have been long held within their respective silos, like really coming out to make the connections of how these struggles for justice are directly interconnected. And one of the underlying aspects for me, from my analysis, working with Move to Amend for the last 7 years, has been, the underlying interconnected issue. Like if there's one single root problem, it's corporate power here in the United States and how it literally permeates in every single institution and aspect of life. Where 90% of what we read, watch, and listen to is controlled by just 5 mega corporations. When we go to the grocery store, there's literally 99% of the products that we get come from just 10 mega corporations, and then of course half of the nation's wealth, more than half of the nation's wealth, is concentrated within just 10 mega banks that live on the East Coast and such. But but even down to the minutia of it, with hospitals, we have a for-profit healthcare system that routinely prioritizes profit and charges the most exorbitant prices, more than anywhere else in the world, for basic routine healthcare needs or whatnot that we see. And you in particular have a front row seat to that, being not just a community organizer and activist, but also a healthcare worker. You want to talk a little bit about what you are seeing during this pandemic when it comes to the current model of privatized healthcare in this country?
Yeah, I have a hard time. I'm probably having this conversation once a week. Can I keep being a nurse? That may be a little too much, but I literally just had this conversation yesterday. So it's a little real upfront for me. Again, when we talk about the healthcare system, we're talking about a system that in its genesis used Black and Indigenous bodies to experiment. We're talking about a system that had beliefs Black people can tolerate more pain, therefore did not need pain medication when getting procedures done, right? In its conception, they sent Black and Indigenous people when needing healthcare to veterinarians and not to physicians, right? So, and even though those things aren't as blatant currently, just like the rest of our systems, right? There's this undertone of institutional racism that is palpable if you happen to be a person of color, right? Is palpable if you happen to be someone who doesn't fit into medicine's binaries. It's palpable. But a lot of the times when we talk about healthcare workers, they don't fit into they're largely not the folks that don't fit into the binary, and they're largely not people of color. So as a person of color, kind of having had to receive care, right? And blatantly saw how a lot of those assumptions were made about my own Black body as I was getting care, and then being on the other side and watching colleagues make those same assumptions about folks that they're taking care of, right? though those assumptions may not be malicious, they're still there, right? So yeah, it's the I was sitting in on a talk, and a gentleman was like making a statement, and I think like he was alluding to like if we had single payer healthcare, that would eliminate the healthcare disparities. And and because I'm at the bedside, I'm like, nah, bruh, that's not like you know what I mean? Like that's not a thing. Like our healthcare workers are still don't have enough cultural competency. Like we're not making sure that the population that we're serving reflect in the staffing. Like there's hella shit that has to be done in order to remove those undertones of institutional racism from our healthcare system. So yes, healthcare for all, and our staffing has to reflect the people we watch people be healthier. And then also like as someone who has to receive care, I'm continually like disappointed when I have to go get care and they tell me how much my health insurance doesn't do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That part.
And I can only imagine folks who don't have the understanding of how our healthcare system works attempting to navigate that, right? And this is not something that they teach us in school. They don't teach you how to access your health insurance or how to go get health insurance. You get a crash course when you turn 18 and you need a doctor, right?
Right.
We could be doing a better job teaching folks how to navigate healthcare systems or making healthcare systems navigatable, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I've experienced it myself with constantly being questioned like how much pain I'm in, and like oftentimes just kind of being like, assigned drugs or like, sent back home and like left for weeks or whatnot to like just kind of see how my pain develops and just like, continuously having my thoughts and feelings questioned within that things. Like, it's a real struggle for people of color, of all colors, really, just like go through that, like this privatized healthcare system and like constantly have our experiences dismissed or questioned within that. And it really speaks volumes in my eyes to just how dependent the current status or like, economic prosperity that's enjoyed by like a handful of people is really dependent upon throwaway classes of people. It's dependent upon racism, sexism, and classism, so that a select few of the population have to struggle in order for the powerful few to be comfortable and like enjoy power and such. And that's why here at Move to Men, like we for our strategy for movement building, anti-oppression can't just be a part of our campaign. We can't just pay it lip service. It actually has to be the campaign, because if we're actually going to create a genuine democracy that is accountable and representative of all people at all levels, then we actually have to centralize the voices of people that were left out from that original discussion from the jump and actually center their shared realities, our shared realities, in order to create a genuine democracy that actually has like that answers to all people and incorporates all of our experiences. So that there will be opportunity to come up with that, but I want to, Asantewaa, if you have any final thoughts or comments that you want to make by the end of the show, and go
ahead. Really appreciative to just like have the conversation. I love talking to you, Keyan. So we just like a room full of people. So that's dope.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate the space. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. And before you go, I want to give a shout out to a reminder too as well to some upcoming events that you and Adam and other folks may can participate in, such as the People's Movement Assembly for the People's Constitution that's next week. October 24th through the 25th, starting at 10 a.m. on Saturday. We're going to be having a national conversation on what does a people's constitution look like? That actually centers people and the planet over corporate property and profit interests. And this is going to be an online teleconference discussion. We'll have a panel of folks from varying communities and movement organizations, give a quick overview of the current crises that we're dealing with here in the United States. And then will be several breakout sessions where people will have the opportunity to talk about those crises that they're experiencing, actually envision a world that they deserve and want to live in, and then strategize around what actions, what steps we can take in order to get to that world we envision. So it's a 2-day event. Highly encourage as many of you all to participate as you can, especially folks that are in the grassroots spaces and on the ground doing the movement work. And then also for folks at home that are tuning in, you can always check in for conversations like this and get an update on what's going on nationally and Move to Mend analysis through our monthly live reports on the fourth Wednesday of every month. This month will be our National Director, Keyan Bliss, doing the monthly Move to Mend live report on Wednesday, October 28th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. So tune in for that. And for the week of Halloween on Friday, October 30th, tune in for a Fright Night film screening on race. The theme is going to be racism, corporate power, and other horrors that are highlighted within fictional films. We'll be showing some films. I believe one of them is Tales from the Hood and They Live. Will be film screenings that you can tune in that Friday for those of you that are on quarantine and looking for so see some real horrors that we actually live in within the United States or whatnot. But yeah, that's those are some upcoming events that we have going on, and there are plenty of other ways that you can get involved if you support Move to Mend, as well as Anti-Police Terror Project. Quick shout out to check out. Learn more about the Anti-Police Terror Project by going to antipoliceterrorproject.org. And also check us out on Facebook, APTP Sacramento and APTP Oakland, as well as Mental Health First. Go to look up MH First on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So check that out. And then if you want ways to get involved with and support Move to Mend, always sign the Move to Mend petition by going to movetomend.org/motion and join over 470,000 other people who are calling for the We the People Amendment to be passed in Congress. You can also check out our movement education program, which gives analysis, which helps our organizers build their capacity and knowledge base around anti-oppression work and analysis so that we can go into our communities as effective organizers and recognize and be able to spot and stop the oppressive interactions that have been ingrained to us from our upbringing. So highly encourage you to go to movetomend.org/education to learn more about that. And it's a self-paced course that anybody can take, whether you're in Move to Mend or not. And then, of course, always a reminder that we on staff are working as volunteers right now during the pandemic. And thanks to small donations from all of you, we have begun the rehiring process and have been able to add 3 more staffers back onto the payroll for full time. So if you are in a position to do so, please donate to Move to Mend by going to movetomend.org/donate. And I want to give a quick space to Asantewaa if you're still there. Do you want to shout out any places where folks can contribute to Anti-Police Terror Project and Mental Health First? And if not, we can always share that on social media or whatnot when you get a chance, but no pressure. Yeah, definitely take a look at take a look at it. Thank you so much, Asantewaa, for joining us for this conversation. We'd love to have you back in the future whenever you're available. And really, thank you all for tuning in. Please don't hesitate to contact us at info@movementmen.org and Facebook.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Asantewaa. Much love.
Bye.
Take care.